Alright guys, for this little project, I'm going to attempt, I know I'll be able to, but I'm still going to attempt to make a bent wood ring, or a wrapped wood ring rather. And what I've got here is I've got a piece of dogwood, about a ½ an inch wide. Piece of dogwood has been soaking for the last few hours in hot water in my kitchen. But because of how dense dogwood is, it is still just barely soaked in. You can see the darkness over here is where it has soaked in just a little bit. But back in here, this is just surface wet. Well, the reason I'm wetting this wood for a couple different reasons, but mainly so that I can take a little sharp block plane and plane a fairly thick strip off of here. I'm trying to get about a 1/64 of an inch thick piece of wood is kind of what I'm going for. So it's fairly thick to take off in one pass with a plane. Just using a real cheap little plane here. Let's see what we can do here. And you're trying to do one continuous motion so you don't break the wood. It turned out pretty well. Okay. I'm not sure how much of this you all are actually seeing on the video. Well, we're getting to the thin part of the wood on this end. I'll see if I can't get one more out of this. I might get just a hair more. Okay, I did a couple of these before I turned the camera on. I say a couple. This is flowering dogwood from here in Northwest Arkansas. Cut this tree down I didn't cut this tree down, collected this tree as a fallen tree from the woods about 2 years ago. And I've had this wood drying in my shop as well as in a semi-controlled climate in my attic for about the last 2 years, more or less. All right, I'm gonna cut it here, and then I'll come back once I've got a mandrel. So the tools you're gonna need for making one of these wrapped wood rings is you are going to need some form of a small block plane or a draw knife that has a thickness gauge on it that'll allow you to keep a fairly consistent thickness as you cut the edge of the board. About a ½ inch wide piece of wood. Woods that are flexible are going to work the best for this for obvious reasons. You're taking a curly cue off the wood and you don't want the thing to crack all to pieces. I think cherry would probably work fine. Oak is probably a bit brittle, but I think cherry would be a good one. Pine might even be a good one for this project. At the end, you're gonna finish this with something like CA or epoxy glue, which will harden and soak in pretty well to wood this thin. Okay, we'll go ahead and cut here, and I'll come back as soon as we've got a mandrel to wrap this on. So you will need, I got started there, then I forgot. You are going to need some kind of a block plane. You're gonna need a mandrel that's approximately the right diameter for your ring. And you can use a dowel rod for the mandrel so long as you wrap the dowel rod in something like saran wrap, just so that you can get this off once you've had the glue set up on it. Or you can wrap it on the mandrel and then take it off of the mandrel before you put the CA glue, which is what I typically do. I've got jeweler's mandrels, but if you don't have that, there's plenty of ways to get approximately the right diameter. You're also going to need a couple of spindle sanding bits for your drill press, unless you have a small diameter spindle sander, and some CA glue. Obviously you'll need that. I'm trying to think what else you're going to need. A little bit of tape to hold the ring shape once you get it on the mandrel, just something to hold it down. And then I'll typically take, once I've got these wrapped, I'll take them to the microwave, put them in there for 15 or 20 seconds. Once they're wrapped to the size they're going to be, obviously you take them off the mandrel if it's a wooden, or if it's a metal mandrel. Once you get them dry, which should only take maybe 30 or 45 seconds if you're cooking it 10 or 15 seconds at a time, and then give it a chance to cool between. Take them out, put the CA glue on them, and then just sand them to how you like them finished. Buffing wheel would probably be a good one too. A buffing wheel, and if you want to spray it with polyurethane at the end or lacquer, that'll give you a nice finish as well. Or you can use the CA glue if you've got a good buffing wheel and just buff the CA glue once you get it smooth. Okay, I'll be back with the rest of this video shortly. Okay, I've got one that I finished earlier. I'm not sure where the zoom is set up on this camera. Try to get this all out of the way here. This is one that I made off camera earlier. Trying to replace my ring. I've got a Dogwood ring that I made, I believe it's been about a year now. And this is out of just a piece of solid dogwood, where the color changes throughout it. So one thing that you're going to miss out on if you're doing one of these wrapped wood rings is most of the wood grain is going to be the same the whole way around the ring. If you cut this wood out, and this came out of a board where the grain ran through it lengthwise, straight through. It's not an end grain. And because of that, you do see the end grain on the sides of the ring. Dogwood ring, real pretty ring. This one has just been finished with CA on the outside, cyanoacrylate, basically super glue, to give you the finish on it. And I probably do need to recoat it. I saw there was a wear spot on it. It may not show in the camera. There's definitely a spot or two where it would, a little one right there, where it would benefit from having another coat put on it. Anyway, that's one option. This one will polish up like that as well. It's just not going to have quite the same variation of color as the solid wood ring has in it. Okay, get that out of the way. We are going to wrap our mandrel. My wife has informed me that we're going to wrap this mandrel, and we're making size 7.5. Or we're going to try to. Should probably wet this first. This is still fairly wet from working with it earlier. It's about the right diameter. I like to make these rings, oops, got off camera there. I like to make these rings a bit thicker than the finished product so that you have some room to sand out imperfections. Get it as tight as you can. You don't want to have a whole lot of space between the rings. Oops, well, there goes that. Just snapped off the end of it. And I've got that on the mandrel right to 7, a size 7 US. A little bit of present wrapping tape just to hold the shape for now, and while the CA glue sets. Okay, double check your size. And that is, you probably can't even see the sizes on this thing, right at a size 7. I'm going to go ahead and cut it here. I'm going to take this into the microwave since it is still fairly wet. And if you're working with this and you give these strips a chance to dry out, and they are going to dry out very quickly, you want to wet them before you put them on the mandrel. And you want them to be completely sopping, soaking wet as you can get them, so that they won't snap on you while you're doing this. And the other reason for getting these a little bit smaller, you can see that this one's already out of round just from the extra tension that it's got right here where the wrap starts. So it's not going to hold its round shape unless you've got a way to hold that round shape. So if you make it a little bit smaller, you can fix that when you're sanding it out, and make it a little bit thicker so you have a little bit of room to sand out, but also to finish the outside too. So a little bit thicker, a little bit smaller, you got to be good to go. I'm going to go microwave this, and then I'll come back to soak it in a bit of CA. Normally I wouldn't do this inside, especially with something like CA glue, because this stuff can be pretty fumy. What I've done is I've stuck the ring blank just down in a little cap. This is something like a WD-40 cap, something to kind of contain this glue. This stuff's fairly expensive, so if you can save from wasting a bit of it, then by all means save it. I mean, not that you can reuse it once you put it in here, but maybe it'll soak up a bit more than it would otherwise. I can see the fumes coming off. Oop, and I can see my fingers getting glued to things, so I'm not going to do any more of this inside. That's basically all I do to it. I'm going to take this outside, let it fume off outside, and I'll get back in here as soon as we get ready to start sanding this and finishing it. All right, here we go. We are going to turn down the inside first with a little drum sander. Once we get the inside diameter established, we'll come back and get the outside done. Fire up our dust collector. Looks like we're down to about a 10. This is a stage where you definitely want to have the dust collector turned on. Even if you don't mind dust, you do not want super glue, cyanoacrylate dust getting in your lungs. It is very unpleasant, and if it gets in your eyes, it's just as bad. We're going to move over to the belt sander and sand this thing down to the width we're looking for. established the rough outside diameter. I'm probably going to hand sand the rest of this. This 80 grit is just too aggressive to do much more. I wanted to put the little bit of a chamfer, the bevel on the edge of this, but this new belt is just not gonna cooperate, or it's gonna take my hand off in the process, so we won't do too much more of that. I'll get over here to the vacuum table and do a little bit of finish sanding on the outside.